Today, I feel very privileged that we are going to be speaking with Iria Saleiro. Iria has helped build multiple billion-dollar companies, extremely respected, influential human being. Iria is now leading sales teams at Multiverse, a company that I genuinely admire. Iria and I first met last year, and what really overwhelmed me was the drive and motivation and the willingness to help people around her grow. And I thought that with the mission for Tevent Talks being about growth and personal development, and also learning who the human behind incredible achievements are, Iria seemed like a perfect match. Important for me to mention again that this podcast is meant to be interactive. So please feel free to share comments on the right and go ahead and ask questions. We will keep 10 minutes at the end of the main podcast to go through the questions that are on the screen, and then we'll have a Q&A in a breakout room where we can all network directly. Iria, why don't you come on in and join the stage and we can get this properly started. Hello.
Hi.
How are you?
Very good. What about you?
Brilliant. Thank you so much for joining today. Again, I feel very lucky to have you in. This is a massive podcast. Again, everybody, this is Iria Saleiro at Multiverse. Iria is a sales leader, a regional sales director at Multiverse, and is also helping with the go-to-market. Multiverse are an incredible mission-led education startup. Iria, I will hand over to you for a moment, just so you can give a little bit more on your own introductions and maybe let the audience know what it is that Multiverse do. It'd be brilliant to hear from you.
Yeah, sure. So, having a few years of sales experience, started about 8-9 years ago now. Originally was within the tech space. Joined early stage startup and helped them from a sales perspective to build team. On about a year, on 2 weeks ago now, I joined an education startup, Multiverse, which is a mission-based company helping tackle two challenges right now that every company's got in the world. Number one, around diversity, and number two, around the digital skills gap in the market due to the digital transformation. And within Multiverse, I run one of the UK sales team and help grow this very, very fast growing company.
Brilliant. These are a few different areas that we will talk about: the digital skills gap, diversity. I think especially that it was International Women's Day recently and it's International Women's Month at the moment. Also, the fact that it's so quickly growing, it's not always easy to appreciate what culture is like within a startup that's absolutely exploding. So I think it would be really insightful for people to hear about that. Sorry, go on.
Yeah, I mean, do you want me to tell you a little bit about the culture in that it's such a fast-paced environment?
That is something that we will definitely come to. That would be one of the key areas. But just to kind of give people a little bit of context on your background, because when people see a sales leader in a position like yourself, it's very easy to almost see a number almost, because we look at ourselves in areas of work and we don't always think, wow, we can get to this level. We can actually improve our own skills and we can introspect and analyze our own maybe weaknesses and achieve brilliance in the workplace. So I'd love to hear about your journey and what it was like when you were maybe 20 years old, coming out of university yourself, and what it is that took you on a path where now you are one of the highest achievers at Multiverse, and everybody around you has given you incredible testimonials about the character and drive and brilliance that you bring to different teams.
I think number one thing is whatever you do, you've got to be passionate about what you do. If I come back to a few years ago, when I was 20 years old, I wasn't exactly sure what I wanted to do back then, but I knew that would be something where I would have to communicate with people and most likely sell, because from a really young age, I had really that, that interest and that kind of natural things around selling whatever. And I think whatever I went for in my professional life, I gave like 200% because it was never an option for me not to be successful. And I always had that competitive mindset to whatever I wanted to achieve, I'd give myself all the possibility with all the hard work, the resilience to do it. And let's be honest, I've been extremely lucky to work alongside like really great mentors and leaders such as Steve McCluskey, Jeremy Duggan, and they really helped me unlock my potential and gave me that self-confidence that I could do anything I want if I want to do it.
Yep. No, that's brilliant. And actually, a question that comes to me from that, because yeah, when I looked at Multiverse in the past, those same figures that you mentioned really stuck out to me. A question that I've been asking myself recently, and the people closest to me know this about me, I'm extremely analytical to the point where I feel that it can become almost dangerous. And I try to grow in every remit, and not just for myself, and the people closest to me. I try to think, okay, how can they better themselves? And I feel it intrinsically. I'm so invested in the people who I love and them bettering themselves. How do you, as a leader, how did Jeremy and Steve, and how do you, Iria, nurture development in the people around you and encourage people to grow, and also within yourself, without it then becoming maybe controlling or too much? And I ask this, for example, because I will see certain habits and traits in myself, and I will genuinely, I won't stop until kind of something's changed there. But I also recognize that there's got to be a moment of pause where you maybe detach from that slightly. I'm just really curious to how you deal with that as a leader, because I know the sales teams who are under you. Brilliant.
Mm-hmm. So I think as a leader, first things which is really important is to understand the person that you've got in front of you. Because me as Iria, you as Nile, we will learn in a different way and we will get things explained to us, or things will matter most to us
Yeah.
in a different way. So first of all is really understanding the person that you are working with. And then it's finding what motivates them and what's important to them, on be able to help them grow, understanding that, on going through that journey with them, if that makes sense. I
Yeah.
think that something I've learned, of course, from Jeremy, on then from Steve. The most important is to understand the person, so you can relate message and be able to develop them. But it's also being passionate about that development, and it's also putting a lot of thought around it. I know in many organizations, development is kind of a word, but no one really has a plan around it and follow around that plan.
Yeah.
On what we do at Multiverse, and what Jeremy and Steve have taught me, is to take the time to think about the development of the person, analyze
Yeah.
what are the small little details that would make like a difference in the career of those person, in their development, and then build a plan around it. Speak to the person around that plan, on be able to decide how you're gonna tackle it, and then it's on weekly basis. Go back to it and try to always have it in your mind on whatever opportunity you've got. Try to help them develop with that opportunity. So it's always a work in progress. Always think about development.
Brilliant. And then with that, because always think about development, and you mentioned multiverse culture, which I'll go into now. Something I find a lot is when you help an individual, when you improve as an individual, it's not necessarily a self-centered thing, because as you grow in competency, you can help those people who are around you. And so it really manifests or irradiates to the wider team. And I'm guessing that it's pretty similar to that at Multiverse. Is that something Is that an element of the culture that you see because people are so focused on the development of not just themselves, but the others around them? Does that really breathe through the culture?
You know, when you've got a culture of development, everyone will be focused about that. But when also you've got a positive culture, people will want to help each other, because some
Yeah.
people will have strengths which are going to be different from the other one. And there is a part of like exchanging the knowledge, but also helping with what you know and you do well, and then
Mm.
having in return someone helping you with other things.
Yeah. So with that, actually, because I have also worked in sales, as you know, some people in the audience might not know. I was previously in business development with Thomson Reuters doing legal technology sales, and sales historically has got a bit of a bad rep, to be honest. And I don't think that is correct. But sometimes people think that salespeople are sharks, or that it's a very self-centered, only money-driven profession. And yes, the money can be brilliant, but often people don't think of salespeople as collaborative, and I would beg to differ with that statement. But I'm just wondering what you see at Multiverse, and it kind of ties into what you said. But it doesn't strike me as just a typical salesy environment. It seems very much about growth and collaboration, and really trying to help a lot of people improve their lives.
You know what, those stigma around sales might be true in some company. I've never been part of a company where that was the truth. I think it comes from some movies,
Mm,
but for sure it does exist. Every company is different, but what's really important is the culture of the company and the people which are hired in the company. Because if you
yeah,
hire only people that's going to be interested in their own benefit and their own success, for sure you're going to drive that kind of very selfish organization. While if you hire the people that will want to be part of a growth and development culture and will want to help each other, then you're going to have like a different culture as a result of that.
yes,
To be honest, sales is a word on is position where, of course, you've got objective and you want to overachieve, and you've
mm,
got your own objective, so you are measuring yourself. But there is a way of doing it without like being nasty to everyone, or being selfish.
yep,
And
absolutely agree.
particularly when you work for a company like Multiverse, where the mission of the company is so important, of course, like the character around it on people behavior will reflect that.
Yeah, I can definitely agree with that. And like you said, when it's a mission-driven company, people, I think that's what becomes so effective, because when it's people who are extremely competent, who are trying to improve themselves, like you said, they're trying to hit targets and overachieve, that can only help the company itself do better. There's a couple of other areas that I want to go into, but again, another question that comes from that is, for me, sales has taught me a lot about myself, and trying to improve myself as an individual has taught me a lot about sales. I'm just wondering, through your career, what have you, or what are the overlaps that you've learned between sales and real life, and then what has real life as well taught you about sales? Because there's a lot to be had there, from overcoming rejection, for example, and then resilience. I'm just wondering what has stuck out to you in those years.
Hmm. I think that's a very broad question, because in whatever you do, you're gonna be able to apply it in your own life. So here for me in sales, like whatever I buy in my life, I'll be able to think about the sales process, and I will put myself in the place of the seller, you know. But I think what really stands out is the resilience.
Mm,
Sales is, is is not easy. You will get, as you said, rejection.
mm,
You will go through tough time, and it's about being able to see the bright side when it's kind of raining or when it's gray
yeah,
outside. And it's about being able to learn from maybe some of your failure in order to make them become a success later on.
yeah, that that definitely makes sense to me, and that's so important as you grow in life and as you mature. Being able to overcome failures is so key, because it will always come. You mentioned as
Always.
well earlier. Definitely. And you mentioned about your motivations, and you said from a young age you'd always been driven. And of course, money
Yes.
counts, but it's not number one. Um,
Mhm.
can I ask you, and it sounds it sounds very cliche coming from a male, but as a woman now in leadership, and you've clearly overcome challenges to achieve that, there's a lot of entrenched issues in the workplace that need to change. I'm just wondering, what are those challenges that you've overcome, and how have you overcome those to actually continuously achieve brilliant things in the workplace and command the respect of your peers?
So, being a woman or just in general? What are the challenges?
I think, again, it sounds pointed, but as with your experience as a woman in the workplace, what have you maybe seen that doesn't
So
align with?
you know, when I first started, I was in quite a male-dominated industry.
Mm,
At that point, it was about like trying to find your way to be respected, to be seen as equal. I was very lucky to be part of organization where women were really empowered and seen as equal than men. I know many of my friends working in other company don't have the same chance. But I do think that over the last few years, it's definitely shifted a lot where women in workplace organization have really taken on board the challenges that can arise from it and are
yes.
putting a lot in place in order to overcome those challenges.
Yeah, I agree with that. Just today, I was having a conversation about maybe quotas in the workplace, and it's an interesting one. I think we spoke previously about how, and maybe it was with another female tech leader. I spoke about quotas, and sometimes there's a issue with quotas, or people think there's an issue that, but what does it achieve in the long run? But actually, it can help steer the ship in a direction which it needs to go to. And I think nowadays there is more awareness of the difficulties for women in the workplace, and so hopefully more opportunities will arise. On that topic, of course, part of Multiverse's mission is diversity in the workplace, and I would love to hear from you what diversity means to you and what diversity means to Multiverse. But then even more so, how Multiverse are actually trying to level the playing field. Because I personally know the Multiverse mission, but it would be great for the audience to hear a little bit more about it.
Yes, so diversity means, a lot of things. It's not only about gender, it's about ethnicity, it's about socio-economical background.
Mm,
And basically, that full spectrum of human difference. It's about ensuring that we are representative of the communities that we serve. And
sure.
then it's really important through the inclusion, as it's not just about like widening the access to the career, but it's also about ensuring people feel they
Yeah,
belong where they should belong, and they are able to achieve their dreams.
that's so important. And it's something that really gets to me quite a lot. Letting people achieve their dreams, because let's be honest, I'm here in a really privileged position. I won a postcode lottery when I came into this earth, and people 10 minutes down the road from me, their entire trajectory in life might be completely different just because of the road that they were born into, because then they couldn't get into a grammar school and then go to a certain university. And I think helping change that system so it's not just about universities that help you achieve the best jobs is so important. Something that you told me when we interviewed last year was that what Multiverse's clients see is that when there is more diversity, and I'm not sure how that's measured, but when there's more diversity on a board of a company, let's say a FTSE 100, I think that company has a percentage of 300 more percent more revenue or more production or more efficiency. You can tell me more about this, but it's
I
incredible.
mean, diversity does bring more efficiency around
Mm,
the workplace. It's about also bringing more innovation. I think just taking like a bit of a step back on explaining a little bit like the issues that we face in today's world. It's, the university. If you look at the diversity, so the problem number one are the university, which are very expensive, and therefore not everyone can afford to go there. On following where you are born, it's kind of gonna decide whether you've got a chance to attend a good university or whether you've got a chance to
yeah,
attend any kind of university. And there is a number of of statistic on one which is particularly interesting around graduate programs that shows that 60% of the people in graduate program are from a privately educated background.
Wow.
On again, it shows that graduate programs are great. However, they are not bringing diversity because
Mm,
again, people coming into those programs are from more privileged background.
very elitist group. Yeah.
On what it shows that wherever you are born kind of will be the big determinant of where you're gonna end up in life.
Sure.
Those university in the last 50 to 100 years have not really changed the way they operate. They haven't really changed what they teach, and therefore they are not adapting to the digital transformation that we are going through, on the fact that the skills which are needed now around data, around engineering, are they are not being taken into consideration, and they are not giving the chance to everyone to access the job of tomorrow. And
Yes.
that will be quite an issue. And when you see that 80% of the jobs that people will do in 2030 don't even exist today and will require those
Right.
skills, it's kind of worrying. There come apprenticeships to give you the chance to access the best career
Yeah.
without starting your life with like being in a lot of debt,
Yeah.
which
That's an intimidating point for a lot of students.
it is. I mean, I remember on my first week at Multiverse, I mean, just before I started talking with Altier, which is one of our is the head of enablement and has been in sales for the last
Right.
25 years, is absolutely amazing. And he was telling me, you can decide to go to university for 3 years, or for 5 years, in order to become like an engineering and be with like a very big debt, or you can
Yeah.
decide to take apprenticeship at Facebook, for example, and be able to be on a software engineering program. So to study 20% of your time, and then for 80% of the time, you apply your learning. So you learn
Yeah.
even more by doing that. You have a salary and you gain experience. So when you get your apprenticeship, when you end that, you've got a chance to stay in that company on get a full-time job, but you get something on your CV which is incredibly valuable. And to be honest, if I was back a few years ago when I had to make the choice to go to university, I'd consider very seriously apprenticeship, because I think it would have brought so much more to my plate than the degrees that I've done. And if you ask me, what do you remember from your degree? Of course, I've learned a number of things, but while at university, I had my own business, and I think I did learn so much more from my own business. And then from my first year at Dynamics, being surrounded by great leaders such as Jeremy, Steve, on
Mm.
great sales people than I did during my degree. And I think it's a shame.
Yeah. There's a few interesting points you touched on there, both your own business, but also, yes, the debt that people can get into at university when there's potentially a parallel choice, which opens up just as many, if not more, opportunities. Could I just ask you very quickly on the point that you made there about working throughout university? Because it's the same here. I studied law at university, but sometimes I look back and think, well, what are the skills that really have changed and elevated me to where I am now? It's not necessarily what I learnt on the course. Sometimes you're learning to learn at university. That was very key for me because a lot of it was self-learning. And then it's the camaraderie, the relationships you build with people around you. How do Multiverse help the cohorts of students achieve that? Is it a situation where students grow in communities? And because from what I've looked into Multiverse, there's incredible positivity and there's incredible rates of kind of retention with those students. It would just be great to hear how Multiverse achieve those same outcomes.
You are bringing on a very valid point. The networking at university is something which is really important. On at
Yeah.
Multiverse, we've tried to replicate that in a different way, because we've recognized how important is that network. And we've created a community where apprentices of any age, so whether you are just starting in your life and you are 18 years old, or whether you are like on an upskilling program and you are 45 years old, you're going to be part of that community, and you're going to have like a number of networking events. So networking
Nice.
event between apprentices, but also guest speaking event, talk about how to improve, how to do some self learning development. So a very very wide range of events to help that and allow people to meet with each other. You get also from that community like some perks where you're gonna get like reduced price for a number of software,
Right.
a number of things that you could do, like ticket for events, theater show. You're gonna get some exclusive content. We are really gonna think like quarter after quarter what can be done to add value to the community, for
Mm,
them to develop and grow as individual. So it's
nice.
extremely important.
I'll be honest, as a service, as a way of life, you're selling this to me. That sounds incredible right now, honestly.
Incredible.
It's brilliant. That is really cool. And it's honestly, I see more and more companies in the edtech space doing great things to open the playing field, but it seems that Multiverse do a few things very well, which really enable it to stand out. Can I ask, because, and it's important for me to know for people in the audience, you are recruiting right now, Multiverse are growing very quickly. Before I go on to what it means to work in your team and what people can learn, because I know that people can learn from Iria. I've already learned from you in the past in 1 hour conversations. Something that I'm dealing with right now is I'm going to be going hopefully into a more managerial position soon. And like I said, there's certain things that happen. You need to learn how to help people grow without being kind of too domineering. But another thing that I've already experienced in my life is imposter syndrome. And for me, that has been going into a certain managing certain processes, so managing maybe the product and dev team, but not realizing that it's my remit to actually have complete control. And I've asked too many questions, maybe. I want to know maybe what your experience of imposter syndrome has been like, because the more and more I speak to well accomplished individuals, it surprises me that a lot of people experience it. And I think for all the viewers, it could be really brilliant to hear from someone like yourself on whether you have experienced it and how you've dealt with that.
You know what? I'm also amazed uh, when I speak to really established persons, which I'm really impressed with. On when we start discussing this subject, I don't think I've spoken to one person that told me no, I don't have it. I think it's kind of any person which is being successful at some point will question themselves, because they will have this will and this desire to become better and to go to the
Mm,
next. And therefore, in order to do that, you need to do some self-reflection, and you need to be quite aware about yourself. And I think that's where it comes from. With that imposter syndrome, it's about accepting that you are not perfect, that you're gonna do mistakes, but it's about knowing that you are doing the best that you can. And you've had like a number of successes in your life, and you didn't have them just as a matter of circumstances, or they just you just been successful because you were sitting
it was
at the
still
right
luck
place
every
at the
time. Yeah.
time. So you need to analyze a little bit what made you successful, what you've done in order to get there, and try to understand and give yourself credit for those successes. I think that's something which is important. Um, Another thing which is important is to separate your feeling from the fact, and on be quite objective around the situation. So for me, sometime when I get into those kind of situation, I try to write down why
Nice.
I'm feeling this way, and I try to understand, and then I try to prove myself that I shouldn't be feeling this way. Or then I decide to go and communicate with other, on talk with my peers, with my family, with my leaders, with my mentors, and just discuss it. And once you've spoken about it, you generally feel way better about it, and the other person will give you a perspective that will help you. On you know what? Sometimes you just need to be kind to yourself.
Yeah, that's yeah. Some really. It sounds as well like you've got great people around you, but also you deal with it in such a healthy way. And being kind to yourself as well. That's something that I think
You
I
need to
struggle with.
be, you know what? You need to be conscious about it. On yeah, you're gonna be competitive. Yeah, you will want to achieve some things, but I think that syndrome can really paralyze you. So it's about
Yeah,
finding your own way to make it a friend, kind of, if that resonate.
yeah, yeah. That resonates a lot. What you said there about being kind as well. This is quite a funny kind of situation, but I think it's been since maybe 2016 where I've been a bit obsessed with, and I say obsessed, obsessed can sound healthy, but really on it with trying to grow in and improve in every element of my life. But it got to the point where I would be watching or sit down to watch TV on a Friday night after a long day of work and the graduate scheme, sit down, put a movie on, and within 10 minutes, I could feel a physical and mental agitation saying, nope, you've got to do something productive. This is stagnating. You need to be working on yourself. So it's ridiculous. I know. So I would be living with my flatmate and I would go out, be 8 p.m. on a Friday. It'd be raining, and I would go running, even though I hate running. I love fitness. I hate running, and I would listen to music, which is really telling me just like you've got to kind of improve yourself. And it got to the point where I was thinking, this is ridiculous. I just need to kind of slow down. So I realized I need to find balance. And for me, for years, meditation has been key, but that still hasn't helped me find balance necessarily. It helps somewhat. I'm just wondering because I'm sure that in your position where you're continuously striving to grow and help those people around you, and when you introspect that much, you can see a lot of things you don't like, so you want to improve. How do you find that balance? How do you find a place of, okay, I can pause now, I can be okay?
I think it's really important to have your own routine, something that works for yourself. You were
Right.
talking about meditation. That's something I'm not really doing. I've just started for about 2 weeks, so I'm not seeing yet like a huge improvement. But stay tuned. I may come back in a
Stick
few
with
weeks'
it.
time,
Definitely stick with it.
a huge difference, because like it is helping so many people. But it's about having a routine on exercising, eating healthy, having a number of hours of sleep. Like for the people that know me, my sleep is really important, and I think
Mm,
that's what keeps me focused during the day and allow me to be like really efficient. So it's about finding your own boundary for having your balance. But I think something which is important on what you are saying, on the fact that you want to go on in your mind it goes at 150 kilometer per hour all the time. It's
yeah.
being okay with the fact that you need time off also, to just relax on get the pressure out, because within a
Mm,
sales environment, there is quite a lot of pressure. And if you want to deal with that pressure in the long run, you need again to get that pressure a little bit like a friend. I'm not sure it does translate as well is in English that it is in French, but you need to find your way to make it work for you. On what works for me might not work for someone else. But separating, having your own time, social time, family time, on your work time, on having some kind of routine around it, I think is very, very important.
yeah,
On in
definitely.
terms of the development, I think it's great to always wanting to improve, but sometimes we try to do too many things at the same time. I don't know if people in the audience are playing golf, but I remember taking a golf lesson a few years ago, where when you make just a small difference to the movement, to the way you are positioned, it can have like a huge impact.
Mm,
You focus on one thing at a time, you've got more chance to master it. But if you try to focus on too many things at a time, I mean, for me, it's just a disaster. I'm gonna end
Yeah.
up like being really, really rubbishly. So with self-development is kind of the same. It's
Yeah.
about identifying, what you want to start focusing on, what you're gonna start, I don't know, working on for maybe 3 months, and really give yourself to that, and then you will go into something else. But if you try to do everything at the same time, I do think it's a bit of a recipe of chaos, because
That's it.
no
Yeah.
human being can learn too many things at the same time. On
Yeah.
growing is a great thing. Wanting to improve is absolutely amazing, but you've got to be quite structured about it. I think something that it's been really helping me over the last few years is being able, taking some time on a Friday afternoon to reflect on my week, analyzing like what I've done well, what I could have done better, what I didn't do well, and then plan on the next week, and think, okay, so I'm gonna
Yeah.
keep on doing that, I'm gonna improve on that, on just keeping that routine, but being conscious on always having your plan to go in that direction.
That translates so much to sales and other professions, but personal growth, but I think to sales directly. And by the way, I'm very conscious about time. And Iria, I could probably ask you questions for 3 hours and continue. Um,
I
I'll
could
ask a couple
answer
more in this.
because I know talking.
I'm sure you could. On that point, though, how can salespeople and how can people in any profession, but let's say sales, let's say you've had a tough week. What are a couple of tips maybe you've learned from Jeremy, maybe in your own experience? And I'll tie this into also why salespeople would want to work for you, because that's another question. Why would people in the sales team, in the audience, want to join your team? But what can they do to quite quickly evaluate themselves and improve their own trajectory as a salesperson? Just small little habits that they can implement, maybe that you've observed, maybe in yourself, in Jeremy and Stephen, and in those people that you've taught who've done really well.
I think like something that makes big difference is the focus on the prioritization. um,
Yeah,
Choosing where you put most of your effort, because a sales job is or leadership job is a job where you've got so many things to do, and you can go in every direction and achieve everything at 50%. So you better really decide what should be your main area of focus and give 150%
yeah,
to that in order to be successful. I see that. Another point that I see, it's always try to simplify situations, simplify challenges. And that's
yeah.
something that Jeremy taught me on makes your life makes things way easier when you simplify. And there is always a solution.
Simplify. That is, yeah, because issues can be so complex. If you break them down, it can seem you can automate tasks if you just work backwards and figure out, okay, how do I get to this? And what you said as well about kind of prioritizing. There's a quote that I quite like, which is, "Does it make the boat go faster?" And it's just figuring out, okay, what is it that you need to move? What lever do you need to move? What is the biggest thing that will have the biggest impact? And maybe look at that.
Exactly. Yeah. And it's taking time out of your really really busy day to think about it and be analytical around it.
Yeah, nice. Being analytical, that is very important. It can be scary for people, but it's very important. Before I start opening up to looking at the questions that may have been coming in, can I ask you again, why would salespeople watching or non-salespeople, why would professionals watching, why would they be looking up? Why would they want to join your team area?
Yeah. So Multiverse is a fantastic company. We've been growing super super fast. As I was saying at the beginning, I come from the software industry, where we normally have the fastest growing software company, and App Dynamics was one of those for quite some time. But here at Multiverse, we are growing faster. But the the additional like positive point on the top of that is you are selling something that change people life. You've got a mission, which makes it way more fulfilling than anything I've done before. So if you want to be part of a fast growing environment with some amazing people being passionate about the mission that we've got at Multiverse, if you want to learn excellence and be surrounded by people that have over 25 years of experience in sales and in other domain of being extremely successful, and learn from them to be able to replicate in your career whatever you decide to do, honestly, Multiverse is a place to consider. I'm in the sales department, so I'm gonna talk for sales, but every department we are hiring. We are hiring in the UK, we are hiring in the US, whether is is in the teaching part with the coaches, whether it's in marketing, whether it's in sales, whether you are junior, whether you've got some experience. If that's of interest, like don't hesitate to send the CV. We've got a number of positions open, and it's only gonna grow with the success we are getting. And it's about joining a company which is changing the world around education. And who wouldn't want to be part of something as special as that?
Brilliant. Yes, I agree. I absolutely agree. And when we look at what we can do there's a lot of issues in society, and it seems that most of them can be addressed from an educational level. Honestly, it seems that the next generations, they're going to be the people who are really influencing what the world can become. And it seems that Multiverse are on a brilliant, brilliant path to helping elevate that. Can I ask you, as well, there was a question that it relates to a question that's come in from the audience, but a question which there's stigmas about apprenticeships, and Multiverse are helping fight those stigmas. But I'm just wondering, what actually is it? How are the offerings that Multiverse can give clients? How do they stand out from the typical stigmas that exist? Sorry, around apprenticeships.
Yeah. So Multiverse, we are the only apprenticeship provider in the market that tackle the two main challenges around diversity and around digital skills gap.
Yeah,
Apprenticeship is no longer just a way. Um, it has really become an alternative to education. And in 2022, people are considering this as another way to access the best career on to develop as professional. It's no longer, I don't know, doing something where you're gonna learn about accounting. It's much more
right.
complex than that, and it gives you so much more possibility, particularly with that digital skills gap due to the digital transformation. Like
Yep.
university are not like helping you learn about data, about digital marketing, about software engineering. So apprenticeship, it's kind of the modern way of going nowadays, I would say. It's no
Brilliant.
longer the apprenticeship, it's like apprenticeship 2.0.
Yeah, it's an apprenticeship that really open. It's an apprenticeship with a purpose. It really opens up amazing opportunities. The skills that the apprentices gain are incredible. A question that's come in from the audience, I really like this, is what is the most common mistake that an organization makes when thinking about diversity?
It's about hiring diverse talent just to hire diverse talent, and just feeling some kind of statistics that they want to have within the organization, and not really thinking about what the diversity can bring to the organization and how can that be built within the organization as a goal.
Nice. Okay. Yeah. So it's thinking about diversity in a very almost isolated fashion rather than thinking globally at the company level what it can help bring to the company.
Exactly.
And also there's a couple of other questions. One from Victor that I really like is, and I have the same question myself, to be honest. What is your advice for a junior salesperson actually looking to forge a path into sales leadership?
So an advice. Um, to make sure that this is really what they want to do, in the way that leadership is different from being an individual contributor, and everything you do is for your team, on helping your team develop and get to unlock their potential and get to the next stage of their career. So making sure you are passionate about it. And yeah, I would say that number one, that you really want to do it for the right reason. Because if you do it for the
Passion.
right, you will do great.
Yeah, passion. That's a kind of that's reflecting a few things you said. Having a passion is a really key foundation for then actually putting in that effort and applying that growth mindset that somebody might have. The other question that's come in is, what does a typical day at Multiverse look like, Iria? And of course, there's lots of different departments, and I'm predicting there's no typical day. But what might you say on this?
When you are part of a fast-growing startup, there is no typical day. So I would like struggle to answer this question, but what I can say is a typical day is filled with like time with your team about brainstorming, sharing ideas, and how to help customer, how to tackle some some accounts, and what can we do in order to speak to certain person. But it's also like being connected with other departments on the helping, whether if there is challenges, I would say.
Nice. Ilya, I hope that goes some way to answer your question there. But as we can attest to this as a startup ourselves, yes, no typical day. It's more just about trying to jump into and not just answer challenges or not just overcome challenges, but also figure out what is the next challenge that we're trying to overcome.
And it's about doing whatever needs to be done in order to get to your goal. About helping the company get to the next stage, so bringing those deals, and on helping people out there, changing the life of a number of people, on having an impact.
So with that, then, where does intellectual curiosity play a part in Multiverse? Because it doesn't seem that you're just an individual contributor. Of course, you've got your role, which might be a sales representative, but where does being curious about the wider business and what the business is trying to achieve play a part for an employee's life at Multiverse?
I think it's extremely important, curiosity, whether you are in sales or you are not in sales, because it will allow you better understand, how the different departments work, how you best interact with those departments. But it will also, help you, when you speak with prospect, or when you've got a relationship with a customer, really nail what they are looking for and be able to really add them value and make a difference, and they will remember you for that. And it's the same like if you are a manager with your team. It's about trying to be curious about the person, so you can make a difference in that person's life.
Yep, I agree with that. The curiosity, that's what enables you to open up those conversations where maybe a person or a business might not realize that they have challenges to be overcome. But when you can really get into the roots and understand that person's why, their drivers, what their goals are, then you can figure out how you can help them, how you can align with them. Before we finish off, I would be remiss if I didn't ask you, because of course, as you mentioned, you worked with Stephen and Jeremy. And you've said previously, this is a question you could probably speak for hours on itself. What do the 3 R's mean to you? What have you learned from Jeremy and Stephen? If I mentioned the 3 R's, just to give the audience a little bit of insight into that.
Yeah. So the 3 R's is the leadership process that Jeremy and Steve have put in place over the last few years, in order to simplify what a leader needs to do in order to be successful. So first R is recruitment. Everything starts with recruiting the right people within your team, having the right characteristic in order for that person to really feel great in that position, on be able to build a career. Number 2 is the retention part, is what I was talking a little bit earlier with, the development. It's about, okay, so you've got someone in your team, that person is not going to do an awesome job without any guidance and without being able to be developed. And it's about, having a plan in place, understanding the person, and always try to see what you can do to make people around you better. And the
Yep.
last one is revenue part, because of course you are part of sales, or if you are in another department, is whatever outcomes the people will have from their job. And it's about if you've got the right people in the organization that will feel at their place and will, feel that this is the right environment and will give everything they've got, mixed with the right development culture, that will lead to overperforming individual. So that's very much Jeremy's way of very simplifying what a leader needs to do. And to be honest, when I jumped into management about like 5 years or so ago, this helped me so much, because when you start a new position, something that you haven't done before, you need to figure out what needs to be done and what's important. On here, with that prioritization on those 3 key, I knew that anything that was outside of those 3 R's were not a priority, and that's led me to be able to build on a lead very successfully.
Brilliant. And you've done it consistently, and I can see how if you simplify it like that and apply those, then yes, success should be destined really there. Before I move and we can move into a breakout room, and thank you so much, Iria, for your time here. Really appreciate it. And I'm sure it's not just me, but I'm sure the audience have learned a lot. I've not done this before, but I would like to see, and if you could pose a question to the audience, what would you like people to consider for 2022? What is a question people can ask of themselves to maybe improve themselves personally, to improve professionally? What is something that you think is a really key consideration for us as humans to actually just pontificate on for a moment as we move into this next year?
It's about asking yourself whether you are passionate about what you are doing, on what kind of legacy you want to leave behind you. I think those are really crucial questions that everyone should ask themselves, and will allow them to be more fulfilled and happier in their life.
Nice. Thank you, Iria. Well, and then more questions come from that, but I'll pause for a second and maybe we can continue in the future. But yes, I really do appreciate your time today. Everybody in the audience, thank you so much for joining. Really enjoyed this conversation. What we've got now, for people who are interested, of course, Tevent is interactive. We've had our chat on the side, but there is a breakout room, which would be on for kind of 10 or 15 minutes. I can teleport you there, but all you need to do is click back, and then you'll come into the main event room and you can join the breakout. Iria, anything else that you would like to say before we all move into the breakouts?
Just one thing I'd like to say. Whatever you do, whatever successes you have is great. Whatever failure you've got, always try to think about what's the learning point on those failure, and what success can come out of those failure. Never see things on a negative way. Always try to look at positive side in anything you do.
Definitely. That L doesn't necessarily need to mean a loss. It can be a lesson. Always. There's always opportunities to grow in that.
Exactly.
That's a brilliant note to end on there. So thank you, Iria, and I'll see you in the breakout in a moment.
Okay.
Thank you, everyone. Bye.